Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And as is royal tradition, the moment we decide to take a week off, the firm announced something major.
Yeah, I really hadn't anticipated a royal wedding happening during the week we try to take a break.
I know, the idea of a wedding happening with, no fanfare, literally, and just, being dropped after the fact blew my mind.
So, like all of you probably, we were working away on Friday when I got the push notification from the BBC that Princess Beatrice had secretly married her fiancé, Eduardo Mapelli-Mozzi, in Windsor. And this was around lunchtime, and the wedding had taken place at 11 a.m. that day. And I was just so shocked because we knew on Friday we'd heard that the Queen was going to be doing her outdoor knighting ceremony for Captain Tom Moore.
Now, Sir Captain.
Captain Sir, I believe. Although he doesn't want to be called Sir, he said. So that was the big news for the day, was that the Queen and Captain Tom were going to be having their showdown with the sword. But on top of that then, it was Camilla's birthday. Camilla Parker Bowles, happy birthday, 73.
And we were so excited for that, and we really felt like that was a big day for us.
There was enough going on,
yeah.
And then on top of that, Beatrice gets married. You may remember we did a bonus episode on Beatrice and Edo, so if you want to get filled in on their relationship and all the kind of interesting timeline stuff there, I would recommend going back and listen to that. It's called Bride to Be. Initially, they had planned to get married in May, and it was supposed to be happening in London, and there was this sort of smaller scale wedding. It wasn't going to be the big televised event that Eugenie had, but we were still expecting a pretty flashy ceremony. As the pandemic hit, they kept saying that they were going to do it, but with a much smaller group, and that they really just wanted to get married, and it was going to happen even if there was only a handful of people there. And then eventually they conceded that no, it wasn't going to happen, and we got this kind of weird tabloid story that they were going to hold on till next year and boost the nation's morale by having a super huge showy extravaganza, which felt pretty tone deaf.
Yeah, at that point it was really not the time.
Yeah. So this came totally out of the blue for us, and it was initially reported by The Sun. They got the exclusive, which was a great scoop, that they had secretly gotten married on Friday morning, and then later the news was confirmed by the palace, who emphasised that the wedding took place in accordance with all relevant government guidelines.
Swoon.
Which is what every bride longs to hear.
I've been dreaming of my wedding day and just thinking about all the government guidelines I can follow. Obviously, it's very good that they followed the guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know about that. We know how these people feel about wearing masks in enclosed spaces.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's very unlikely that they did that, but we'll never know. The Sun did speak to a friend of Beatrice and Edo's who said that the reason that the ceremony was arranged on Friday was to make sure that the Queen could be there before she leaves Windsor to go on her big summer holiday to Balmoral at the end of the month.
She is absolutely rigid about her holiday dates. There's no movement at all. I said I'm going, and I'm going.
It's just kind of strange to me that it had to be on that day, the same day as the Captain Tom Moore spectacle and
Camilla's
the
birthday.
future Queen Consort's birthday.
Exactly. I don't think the Queen has things on every day at this point, you know?
Her schedule is pretty clear, I think.
Yeah.
She did one Zoom call this month, but
Yeah.
We'll get onto the kind of conspiracy theories about that later. The friend of the couple said to The Sun that they were obviously very keen for the Queen to come, so the wedding had to happen before she goes up to Balmoral. So this was a great opportunity. So many guests were disappointed not to make the big day, but understood the reason for it. And said of the Yorks, they are just like a normal family and had to make sacrifices like many others have up and down the country. And they're looking forward to having a wonderful celebration when the time is right.
Just like a normal family.
They did speak, the Mail spoke to one of Edo's cousin once removed, called Dario Mapelli-Mozzi, who said, "We heard the wedding was postponed to next year, but that was clearly to keep it secret. Maybe they did it now to be sure that the Queen could be there." Or perhaps because of the problems with her father, they didn't want to go overboard with publicity in case anyone criticised him.
I think
Just
you
in
might have
case.
something there, yeah. And we're definitely going to get into all the Andrew of it all in a little bit.
The reports in the Sunday papers, we'll start with the Sunday Times, who spoke to a source who said that Beatrice and Edo were keen to wed privately and quickly after their 10-month engagement.
I mean, I'm wondering if they're thinking, God, the Queen's going to head off for 3 months for her holidays. It'll be over a year by the time she's back.
Yeah. So they had the ceremony. They got married at the Royal Chapel of All Saints in Windsor Great Park, which is where the Queen goes for private prayer. I think she goes to services at a different chapel in Windsor, but this one is kind of smaller. It fits about 180 people in it.
Well, that's what you do, isn't it? You go to your private chapel and then you have your public chapel for the bigger events, the more flashy kind of communions and stuff like that.
How busy are churches these days? But it's a really lovely chapel. Like the photos, it's beautiful. It's like a storybook chapel, I think. It looks gorgeous. And on top of that, it's on the grounds of Royal Lodge, which is Andrew and Fergie's house, where Beatrice and Edo have been spending lockdown, and apparently Eugenie and Jack Brooksbank have been there as well, so the whole gang has been together. It meant that Beatrice apparently could walk to the chapel from her house.
That's an amazing detail.
We'll get onto the photos in a moment, but it looks like she's wearing ivory colour shoes. I wouldn't want to step foot outside in ivory colour shoes until I was having my picture taken. You get stuff all over them.
Or maybe she had a little bag with her shoes in it.
She had those like fold up ballet pumps.
Yeah.
The flowers were heavenly.
They're beautiful, yeah.
So the bouquet was designed by Patrice Van Helden, who's a kind of favourite in upper class circles. She also did the flowers for Princess Eugenie's wedding, and it was a kind of more modest bouquet than we usually see for royal weddings, certainly. And the colours were so pretty. There was the pink and white roses, the trailing jasmine, the sweet peas. I think some of it came from the gardens of Windsor Castle. And then as well as that, in keeping with the royal tradition, they had the sprigs of myrtle.
What a great tradition to have. It sounds so artisanal. I think Meghan would approve.
Just looked so gorgeous with the floral arch. Like floral arches are so huge with brides at the moment.
Yeah.
You may remember Meghan Markle and Prince Harry had a big floral arch at Windsor at their wedding, and it just made for really beautiful photos with that kind of pink and white flowers.
It was really stunning.
According to the Mail, Beatrice and Fergie organised the wedding in just 2 weeks after the government relaxed the lockdown restrictions.
I can't believe Fergie managed to plan a whole wedding without dropping the ball on her frankly deranged series of children's book readings.
She has been busy.
Well, apparently during the ceremony there were no hymns sung, but they did play music including the national anthem. Stop me if you've heard this one before.
You've got to curtsy to the Queen on your wedding day.
God. I know, I think we've discussed this before, but like, does the Queen just like get so fed up of hearing that? Like, she hears the like opening notes and it's like, oh Christ, here we go again.
Like, are they just playing it out of somebody's boombox? Like,
There'd be an organ and stuff in the church, wouldn't there?
are they allowed to have an organist? Like, it's such a small group. I think it has to be less than 30 people. The whole atmosphere of it seems so alien and so unnatural, like especially if you're someone who regularly goes to weddings. This idea that you can't give the bride and groom a hug, you can't cheers them, you can't be touching glasses with anybody, you can't be shaking hands with anyone, that when you're having the meal that you have to sit 2 meters away from people. Are you like hollering at people across the table during conversation? And then this idea that you can't sing because raising your voice is said to spread the droplets faster. So I guess that's why they broke out the boombox.
You should never have a wedding without discussion of droplets.
But we did get a couple of readings Fergie read a poem and Edo's mother read a poem, two of the couple's favourite poems, Shakespeare's Sonnet 116.
One of his real greatest hits of all time. It's the one that has the line, "Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds." Classic.
And I Carry Your Heart With Me by E. Cummings. They sound like pretty standard
Wedding poems.
Like certainly more than the weird Great Gatsby reading that Beatrice did at Eugenie and Jack's wedding.
Yeah.
Which was rather ominous. But as we had spoken about before, Wolfie, Edo's 4-year-old son from a previous relationship, was the best man and page boy.
Excellent job. Well done, Wolfie.
I'm sure he did fantastic work. Beatrice reportedly had one bridesmaid who we can only assume was Eugenie.
Yeah.
Eugenie was there, so I would imagine it was her.
It would be a big snub. Especially if you can only have 30 people.
Guests, including the Queen, stood socially distanced in the church, and then afterwards they had an outdoors reception at Royal Lodge, except the Queen didn't stick around for that.
Yeah, she legged it after just 45 minutes because she had to go off and see Captain Tom.
I mean, she wasn't seeing Captain Tom till 3 p.m. and she had to leave at 11:45 to go up the road.
And she didn't change.
Yeah, she had the same outfit on. It's like a quick little drive. Did she need to have a big lunch or something? She did tell Captain Tom later on, "My granddaughter got married this morning. Both Philip and I managed to get there. Very nice." Oh yeah, Philip.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. He was wheeled out. He made it to the wedding.
They inflated him for the big day.
Yeah.
It's surreal, like seeing the pictures, because on Friday the only pictures we got were of the two of them in the car heading back up to Windsor Castle, and it was so weird seeing pictures of him.
I saw they had pictures of him in the car from the wedding, and it said, like, Prince Philip looks happy and healthy. And someone had tweeted it being like, "I've never seen anyone looking further from happy or healthy."
Andrew was also there. We didn't get any pictures of him, but reports say that he walked Beatrice up the aisle. Otherwise, though, nowhere to be seen.
But before we get on to everything Andrew, let's talk about this dress.
Oh my god. The minute the wedding was revealed, I was on the hunt. I had to see the dress. As you know, Tom and I have been fascinated with what this dress was going to be. We had very high hopes for something wacky, something very untraditional, very modern, very unusual, fashion forward. We had all kinds of dreams. We had a Pinterest board.
We joined Pinterest in order to do it.
Tom did all kinds of Photoshop work to give her some ideas.
And it was all for naught.
Because in the end, she went with one of the Queen's old dresses. She went vintage.
Which is, very sustainable, and we applaud that.
This was the dress as well that she had been planning to wear in May. It's not like, oh, well, what have you got in the closet? Because I didn't get time to finish the other one. This is the dress that was destined all along.
So we've been told.
It was a dress from the 1950s, ivory, taffeta and diamante gown designed by Norman Hartnell, who you may know his name. He was a British couturier, very iconic, created the Queen's wedding dress, the Queen's coronation dress, also Princess Margaret's wedding dress, which is very different in style from the stuff you made for the Queen. It was a lot more simple and a bit more modern.
And he was mainly known for dressing the royals. He died in 1979, but he, over the course of his career, dressed 4 generations. He dressed Queen Mary, the Queen Mum, QE2 herself, and Princess Anne.
He was also the first British fashion knight after the Queen Mum invested him just 2 years before he died. But I was reading this really interesting Telegraph piece about him. It was talking about how King George VI took him on a tour of the royal collection and urged Norman Hartnell to spurn modernity in favour of tradition and all its reassuring connotations. Not that he required much convincing, because he would later say, "I'm sick to death of the saying elegance is utter simplicity. I think it's a hoodwink. Some designers just lack the inventiveness to make it non-simple."
Meow.
He also said, "I despise simplicity. It is the negation of all that is beautiful." And one other quote I thought was really good. After fashion had started to change and become a little more informal and moving away from that very gala Deb style evening wear, he lamented to the New York Times, social conditions have altered, so to wear a beautiful dress is all rather corny now. I find the strangled dedication that the modern young girl has to the ugly rather inexplicable. If fashion reflects the times at the moment must be awfully tatty.
Oh my God.
So I don't think he'd be very happy with modern fashion. But in general, he rejected a lot of the current trends, like the shorter hemlines, the flapper style, the more liberated silhouettes. And he revived the old crinoline styles, and he used a lot of quite heavy embellishment, and as well as that very delicate materials like silk, satin, tulle, chiffon. One of his most famous collections he did was the white wardrobe for the Queen's state visit to France in 1938, which was said to be a big inspiration for Christian Dior. But I think the crucial line in the Telegraph piece I was reading about him is where they say he understood that his role was to create dignified dresses that allowed the royals to be seen and admired for the right reasons. And you kind of can see how that would apply right now.
It's a pretty interesting choice for Beatrice. Like, as you were saying, it's very unmodern, and we had expected her to go for something very current because of her general fashion sense. It's a very glamorous dress, so very romantic, but it really hammers the tradition and the history and, like you said, like the days of the Debs, the debutante balls and things.
I think it's just surprising to me because from looking at these pictures, and we only have the two pictures, so we don't get like the clearest idea from all angles, but it looks to me very much to be a princess dress, a fairy tale wedding dress, and almost like a Disney princess dress with those puffball sleeves. Like, it has that gauzy quality to it, like it's a piece of confectionery almost. And that would seem really at odds with the idea of the modern royal woman, to be harking back to that very doll-like style of dressing. But in a way, I find that juxtaposition between Beatrice as a person and her general style with this kind of dress to be almost kind of camp.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I think a lot of it was in the makeup, and obviously because she's very striking looking, and then the makeup is very modern and has very like clean lines and stuff to it. So I felt like it was almost like a kind of hyper-real image or something, which I think can play into that kind of idea of camp, definitely.
Yeah, the makeup I thought was beautiful.
Yeah,
it was
gorgeous.
She looked incredible. Definitely the best she's ever looked.
Yeah.
The hair, she wore her hair down, looked fabulous, like so shiny, and
she looked so happy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, we have to talk about the tiara. We had been debating whether she was going to wear a tiara, and she went for a fucking knockout.
Like, what's the point of wearing a tiara if your wedding is behind closed doors? Unless it's this fucking tiara.
Yeah, because I had been wondering if she was going to go for one, would it be something from the archives that we hadn't really seen, a lesser known piece? But she went for one of, if not the most iconic tiara that she could have picked, other than, you know, the Lover's Knot. She's never going to do that. But it was the Queen Mary fringe tiara worn by the Queen on her own wedding day. In 1947, it was her something borrowed. And like you might have heard that story about how it broke on the Queen's wedding day, that the frame snapped and they had to like really quickly fix it up for the Queen. But you can still see, if you look at the photos, that it's sort of slightly off center, which I like. But the tiara was made in 1919 from a diamond necklace given by Queen Victoria to Queen Mary, who then wore the tiara on her wedding day. As well as that, the Queen Mum wore it a bit, and then Queen Elizabeth inherited it after her death, and Princess Anne wore it at her first wedding to Mark Phillips in 1973.
This is like the wedding tiara. It's knocked up so many.
I think the most recent time we saw it was that the Queen wore it in her Diamond Jubilee portrait for New Zealand in 2011. Well, it came out in 2012. But the style tiara, you know, it's kind of a sort of stripped back version of a Russian kokoshnik, which was very popular in the late 19th and early 20th century. It's such a gorgeous, like such a striking piece with the spikes.
Yeah, it's instantly recognizable. I know a lot of these tiaras are instantly recognizable to people who are in the know, but I think this one really stands out from them. There's kind of no mistaking it.
I think in general, it sent a very clear message, you know, on top of looking amazing.
Yeah.
That the Queen loaned her this particular tiara was a way of reminding us of how close the Queen and Beatrice are, because we've heard a lot about how they have a very close bond, and this seemed like an industrial strength, pure effort.
If they had had this big wedding and a big tiara moment like this, you could say that this was about a rehab for the whole York family, or for the whole royal family maybe. But I think this combination of a small private wedding with this incredibly personal piece of jewellery from the Queen is like a very targeted seal of approval from her.
And I think to add to that, the fact that the dress is also the Queen's dress, I think that is really bolstering that message. Like, what did you think the first time you saw the dress before you knew who had designed it or any of that?
Okay, well, my first thought was that I wasn't really too sure about the diamantes, the kind of embellished lines going down it. I think maybe the first thing I noticed about the dress was it appears to have a square neckline, and I was thinking, oh, that's quite like contemporary, modern of Beatrice, that she would go for that. Then to find out that it's a vintage piece, I thought that was quite interesting. I'm never really a big fan of when you like combine the two materials, like it has that trim, or the bottom part of the dress is like in a more satin kind of material, and I'm not normally a big fan of that. So I wasn't like super into it, and a lot of my interest in this dress came once I realised its history.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was maybe a bit warmer on it than you. I really liked how the detailing with the diamante, the kind of lines reflected the spikes on the tiara, and I thought there was a nice synergy there.
Yeah.
But I wasn't crazy about that trim, like you said, or the puffball sleeves.
All in all, I felt like it was more of a hardcore PR move than like a real expression of her personal style.
I think as well that factors in with the photos
and
the choice of photos that they released, because we only got 2, and they're both taken by Benjamin Wheeler, who is a fine art wedding photographer who doesn't appear to have worked with the royals before.
Mm-hmm.
And he has that very popular style of the fine art wedding photography where it's quite stylized, it's very warm images, very looks.
Yeah, there's almost like a vintagey feel to them in the saturation. It's almost like they're kind of 70s-ish, I want to say, but very filmic quality anyway, but also a sort of Instagram luxe vibe.
Yeah, this would fit right in on our Pinterest board. The 2 photos that were released, we had one of Beatrice and Edo leaving the chapel through that lovely floral arch, and then the other is the weird one, the socially distanced portrait with the Queen and Prince Philip. What did you think of this portrait? This family portrait?
What I found odd about it was that the Queen got closer to Captain Tom, and I felt like, you know, they could have been a bit closer, but I guess they knew what they were doing. It's just a shame to have that as your wedding photo.
I mean, I guess maybe it's supposed to have kind of a candid quality in that Beatrice and Edo are looking in one direction and the Queen and Philip are looking at the couple and smiling, and they're very sweet the way they're looking at them, and it's a nice, tender family moment.
Yeah.
But you do kind of wish that you'd been able to get a nice family portrait of them together.
Yeah, and I suppose, you know, they've talked, I think, about having a bigger celebration at another time, and I wonder if they'll get a lot of good family snaps from that.
That's probably going to be in Italy, though. Like, this is the last royal wedding the Queen's ever going to see.
Yeah.
And Philip, too. So it seems a strange one. I don't know how many brides and grooms would want the legacy of having a COVID wedding, but I did think it was kind of weird that we didn't get any photos with Wolfie, although I can understand the desire not to want to put him in the spotlight by releasing those photos.
Yeah.
Although it's also kind of a landmark moment to have the first royal princess who is a stepmother. then as well as that, I thought it was strange that we didn't get any photos of them with either of their parents, which the Sunday Times described as a break with royal tradition. But I think we all know why we didn't get those.
Yeah, they obviously wanted to keep Andrew as far away from the narrative as possible, which doesn't necessarily make sense in terms of, like, they could have had a photo with Fergie maybe, but he was conspicuously absent.
I know. And then obviously the story becomes, where was Andrew? As it was on the front pages of the Sunday papers. The common thread with a lot of these reports was that Andrew shied away. Andrew was out of the frame. Andrew was the invisible father of the bride. All that kind of stuff. And the Sunday Times report noted that Andrew appeared to be airbrushed from royal history. And they quoted a royal source who insisted that the choice of photographs was very much the couple's decision, but they pointed out that it's understood that Andrew wished to avoid overshadowing his daughter's big day.
The source said, "The Duke of York wants people to celebrate his daughter getting married rather than focusing on him. If the Duke had been in the pictures, the circus across the pond would have started up and people would have accused him of trying to ram himself into a picture with the Queen. You can't win. The one thing nobody can criticise the Duke for is his love for his daughters, and he doesn't want to be a distraction for his daughter's wedding." I mean, how much of this do you believe is Andrew saying he doesn't want to be distracting and everybody else saying, Andrew, you can't be in the photos, it's too much of a distraction?
I just felt so sad for Beatrice that this is the story everywhere. And obviously the wedding is about the two of them and their family and friends, and it's not about what people say in the newspapers. But again, I wouldn't want this to be the story around my wedding.
This is probably the best possible outcome for it, though. I think if they'd had a more public wedding, or if there had been pictures of Andrew, then the stories would have been worse. I think, like, obviously it's a shame for her to have to read all the "where was Andrew" stuff, but, like, I think that that's probably the easiest headlines to read.
We did see some pictures of Andrew on Saturday because he was photographed the morning after the wedding driving around Windsor wearing a rugby top emblazoned with the motto of the Order of the Garter, "Honi soit qui mal y pense," which is in French maxim, which translates as "may he be shamed who thinks badly of it," which I guess is like, only have positive thoughts of others to avoid bringing negativity on yourself. Is that a message, Andrew? Are you trying to send a message to us?
He may, for the first time in his life, have not been interested in ramming himself into a photo with the Queen. He's certainly done a lot of that over the last year. But he was not above wearing his Order of the Garter rugby top, just to remind everyone that he has the highest possible honour that the Queen can bestow.
Yeah. We can't talk about this without talking about the coverage of Andrew. And the coverage of Andrew this weekend has been really interesting, particularly because if the intention was to erase Andrew from the whole story or minimise his role, it didn't work, and it wasn't going to work. That was never going to happen. But I think the piece that really stood out to me was Richard Kay's story in the Daily Mail, which had some very strong words about all this. He describes Andrew as once a national hero, now a figure so diminished by the ongoing Jeffrey Epstein scandal that he dare not even be seen giving his own daughter away.
He talks kind of in general about the wedding and how it's a very unique circumstance because of the COVID guidelines and everything. He says no royal wedding in living memory has been coordinated with such an absence of public joy and celebration, and he characterises the wedding as a tragedy. Beatrice's big day will be remembered instead for the two long shadows cast over a royal nuptials blighted by misfortune. Those two misfortunes are coronavirus and her father, Prince Andrew.
And I think this was notable because initially when it came out, a lot of the conversation around it was like, good for her that she was able to do this in secret. And at the same time, we had some people pointing out that when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle wanted to have their baby in private, that they were accused of hiding. And that there was a lot of criticism levelled at them for that. And that Beatrice seemed to be getting treated a lot lighter. It then seemed significant to me that this piece was just straight up calling them out and said, whatever spin the royal family handlers put on the modest event, it will inevitably be seen as Andrew's ultimate disgrace that Beatrice was obliged to marry in this way.
I mean, it's such strong words. And like you said, I don't think the royal family would have been totally blindsided by the possibility of negative coverage. But I think for it to be this almost vitriolic towards Andrew and the situation, I think that might have come as a surprise. Maybe they expected some leniency because it's a royal wedding.
Yeah, and he even points out that the church where she got married in is more often the venue for much sadder royal events. He writes that it was where gamekeepers kept vigil around the coffin of the Queen Mother after her death in 2002, and it's often the scene of the funerals of Windsor estate staff and royal friends. Weddings are almost unheard of. There's just generally this air of poor Beatrice.
Yeah.
But also we can talk about what was the deal with the delay in the photos, because as we know, the photos only came out on Saturday night, and that meant that we had spent like much of the past 36 hours basically being like, where are the photos, where are the photos, where are the photos, where are the photos, like everyone else. And Richard Kay points out that perhaps most bizarre of all was the announcement from the palace that no photographs of the event would be released for 24 hours. This was because it was decreed that nothing should upstage the knighthood the Queen was bestowing on the nation's favourite charity fundraiser, the extraordinary Captain Tom Moore. This surely was the flimsiest of arguments, because if this was truly the case, wouldn't it have been more sensible to postpone one or the other ceremonies? I totally agree.
Yeah, it does seem, like we said, the Queen's schedule isn't exactly chock-a-block. You know, they could have done it the day before, they could have done it next week, you know.
The announcement itself upstaged the knighthood.
I do think it's a flimsy excuse. I can see how there could be some reasoning that if the firm are kind of worried about public attitudes towards the monarchy, the idea that Captain Tom and every man who has, you know, raised money for the NHS is having his moment taken away by someone who was born into a rich and powerful family.
No one other than you is going to think that.
But I'm just saying, I agree that it's a flimsy excuse, and I don't understand how it tracks, really.
In addition to the delayed photos, he points out that there was no information on the attendance numbers, on who the bridesmaids were, if there were bridesmaids, all that kind of stuff. And he says, such lack of information can hardly be to avoid overshadowing Captain Tom. Indeed, the only conclusion can be that it was rather to avoid drawing attention to Prince Andrew.
I wholeheartedly agree with this.
And he does point out that Beatrice apparently wanted a less formal ceremony and that she's planning a bigger second wedding or party in Italy, but for Andrew, so used to being the centre of royal attention, the humiliation must now be complete.
Yeah, I really hope that he got the sense that everybody was having to plan this stuff in spite of him being there, rather than it being a celebrated fact that the Duke of York was going to be in attendance, you know.
And we had talked about how there was some murmurs that it might be a rehabilitation tool for Andrew, and Richard Kay points that out as well, where he says only a few months ago royals and their advisors looked towards Beatrice's wedding as being the moment when Andrew's public rehabilitation might possibly begin. Yesterday showed that it is as far away now as ever. And I think that's really true, because we had heard that Andrew was confident that he would be able to make some steps back into public life, and a royal wedding would be a great way to do that when people have a lot of good feeling and goodwill towards the bride and her family. And this was just totally shut that down. He's not going to get another opportunity like this, unless maybe there's a pregnancy or we've got a baby or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like he'd have to work super hard to try and get another chance after this if they wouldn't let him be front and centre at his own daughter's wedding. And, you know, for good reason.
And also, are they worried about some of the legal proceedings? And would they need to do it now in case there are possible disruptions in future from Ghislaine Maxwell's testimony?
Well, I had been really of the opinion that part of the delays, obviously there was, you know, the coronavirus pandemic, lockdown and all of that, but the fact that it took so long for them to even announce a date and to get those proceedings kind of in order was that they were waiting or hoping that the Epstein stuff would die down and go away, and that they could do something with all the family very prominent, with everything bad behind them. And it just seems like that has not happened. It's an ongoing thing. We are often getting new updates. Like you said, Ghislaine Maxwell is now in custody, and there doesn't seem to be any quick end in sight.
I do think the papers this weekend would have made a really bruising read for Andrew's ego, especially seeing it on the front page.
Yeah.
And I think we know that he would be furious that he didn't get to have his big day at the Buckingham Palace reception and the big wedding and the photos of him walking her down the aisle and maybe the TV coverage as well.
Yeah.
That he possibly dreamed of all of that. But aside from Andrew, what is our verdict on this wedding? Do we think she did the right thing? Do we think she should have waited to do a bigger celebration when she could have more people there? Did we want to see more of it? Was the dress good?
Well, okay, my kind of first thoughts are this is the only royal wedding probably that we as airheads are going to be able to cover. And we were excited about covering a big royal wedding. And I think we've had a bit of a trade-off because we've not had the big spectacle and all the build-up to it and, you know, everything that you would get, say, in Meghan's wedding. But we have got a totally unique royal wedding.
Yeah.
That's, you know, never happened before, and it's incredibly exciting for that reason.
Yeah, I think at a time when, you know, we're sitting around in like leggings and looking for the pictures of her wedding, and I think you get really pure escapism from a royal wedding that I feel like we need or we really want now in lockdown. And that kind of glamour, we're so starved of it in a time when there are no red carpets and fashion shows are dramatically different and royal engagements are like waist up Zoom things, and we just have so little of that kind of glitz and glamour and stuff. So in that sense, it's giving us a real dose of fantasy.
Yeah. I think in terms of my feelings about the dress and the photos, I think if you took the tiara away, that photo of them coming through the flower arch, which is lovely, it could have been from any society, posh person wedding. And, you know, it's a beautiful photo. She looks incredible. I'm not a big fan of the dress, but, you know, you can't really see that much of the dress in that photo in terms of, like, seeing exactly what the embellishments are and exactly how the sleeves are and things like that. But I thought it was a bit of a letdown other than the tiara. Obviously, when you put that in the mix, it becomes very royal.
I know. And just looking at the dress, it felt to me like a piece you would see in a museum, and that I would like to see in a museum because I want to see all the embroidery and stuff up close, because I would imagine that kind of detailing is really breathtaking when you can admire it in its full splendour. But the kind of photos that we got just seemed to me so different from what I was expecting from Beatrice, and seemed to almost be sacrificing her personal style for this nod to tradition and to history and to the Queen. And I just didn't get the kind of warm, fuzzy, happily ever after romantic feeling that I get when I watch the other royal weddings.
Yeah.
And I guess part of that also is that we don't really know that much about Beatrice and Edo's relationship. We don't see them interacting much. We don't know what kind of dynamic they have. And, you know, the same way that you can be like, oh, like that moment between Harry and Meghan was so cute, or Eugenie and Jack are so sweet together, or whatever, that less is known of these two. So you don't feel as emotionally invested in the wedding.
Yeah.
But just getting these two photos that, like you say, could be from some aristocratic woman's Instagram.
Yeah, exactly.
Felt a little anticlimactic to me. And did make me feel sad that it'll probably be like 30 years before we get another royal wedding.
What did you think about the PR of it all? Like, was the stuff from the Queen too much, or was it a nice gesture?
I think the tiara would have done the job.
Yeah.
And I think the socially distanced portrait was a nice touch.
Yeah.
That it was kind of funny, but it was a cute photo. The fact that the dress was also belonging to the Queen was a little heavy-handed to me. And I understand that Beatrice would be in an impossible position trying to navigate around her fucking nightmare father.
Yeah.
And very embarrassing mother as well. And as well as that, having had her sister's huge wedding a couple of years ago, the board's kind of stacked against her. And this was the best she could hope for, I think, unfortunately. And it was still lovely. And those photos are beautiful. And she looked amazing.
Yeah. I think that, like you say, we don't really know that much about Beatrice and Edo. But what we do know about Beatrice is what she wears, because we've seen her at a lot of other big royal events. So I'm sure she chose the dress. But having a dress which is so closely linked with somebody else just seems like this is a woman who like expresses herself through her clothes and wears things that other members of the royal family wouldn't. And she hasn't been able to do that, hasn't wanted to do that for whatever reason on her wedding day. I thought was a bit of a shame.
I think she probably had top of mind, I do not want people to be talking about my Philip Treacy hat from Kate and Will's wedding.
Yeah.
I want to blow everyone out of the water. I want to look like a beautiful, glamorous princess. And she did.
Yeah. Mission accomplished.
Yeah. So I hope I hope they're happy together.
Yeah, I hope they were able to enjoy themselves on the day.
Well, Tom, the Mail on Sunday reported that after the ceremony that was only 30 minutes long and the photos with the Queen and Philip, they went back to a pop-up pub called the Duke of York, where Andrew,
the only Duke of York that's popped up that day.
Where Andrew and Edo gave speeches and they played with a dartboard and they were able to dance at a social distance with 14 of their friends.
Oh.
And then the Mail on Sunday reported that Beatrice told a friend, "It's been a whirlwind." So I hope they were able to enjoy it, and I hope they were able to enjoy their wedding night, which they reportedly spent in a special glamping pod.
That is pretty special. And I think it was probably pretty special as well, because while Beatrice got the Queen's dress, Edo got Prince Philip's underpants.
I thought you were going to say Edo got to take it off. Oh, I actually got it wrong earlier. They're not staying in Royal Lodge at the moment. They have, in the past couple of months, been staying with Edo's mother and her third husband, who is a sculptor, in Chipping Norton. So let's hope they made the most of that glamping pod before they went back to mummy-in-law.
Oh, I can't wait for our invite to Italy.
Yes, I will be really hoping that if they do something in Italy that we get pictures from that as well.
Yeah.
And that maybe that could be, much like Meghan's second evening dress seemed more in keeping with Meghan's personal style, that Beatrice may also be able to experiment a little bit more.
Yeah.
And give us something a little wackier, please. Pinterest board is still live if she needs any ideas.
We should print it out again and post it to her.
We'd love to know what you guys thought of all this. If you liked the dress, if you liked the secret ceremony idea, what did you think of it? Tell us. You can contact us on Instagram and Twitter at AirheadsPod and on Facebook at Airheads, or send us your stream of consciousness commentary on the whole thing at airheadspod@gmail.com.
And if you like this episode, you can leave us a 5-star review and let us know all your thoughts on the wedding there. And don't forget to tell a friend.
Thanks so much for listening. We hopefully will get to take the rest of the week off, and we hope you'll come back and listen to us next time. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.
Have you seen my bugs? Everybody, look at my bugs. Would you like some bugs in your garden? No. But we could eat these bugs. Would you like to try and eat these bugs? Look. Come closer, children. Come closer. Look. Here is a caterpillar bug.